Good morning and welcome to day 19 of this 30-day adventure to great photos. Wow! Hope yesterday you had a blast shooting at slow shutter speed and that you discovered what was happening with moving object. If you didn't know about it, if you already knew about it, well, hope you got some creative shots out there. Make sure you share them on the Facebook group and share your analysis because that part is actually the most interesting. Now, today I kind of want to dig deeper into shutter speed. What is it? How do you use it? What settings to use when for the optimal results, okay? So let's get started. The first thing you should know about shutter speed is that the shutter speed is actually going to decide how long your camera is going to get light on the sensor, okay? So it defines the duration because it's the speed. The shutter is going to go up and down very quickly or very slowly, which means there's more light that's going to go and hit your sensor. So a higher shutter speed is going to let less light get into your sensor than a slow shutter speed. Now on top of that, when you're shooting with a high shutter speed, you're also freezing the action, and the higher the shutter speed, the faster the object can go while still being frozen. And when you're shooting with a slow shutter speed, the objects are going to get more and more blurry if they're moving fast. So there is a sweet spot for everything, and I'm gonna share with you my very easy to remember guideline as to what shutter speed to use in what circumstances. So first one, action shots. When people are moving fast in and out of a frame, or that I'm shooting kids or sport or animals, what is very important is to shoot at minimum 1/500th of a second. Why is that? Because it will freeze your action. Obviously, you will freeze that movement, and then you can go higher and higher, maybe 1/1000th of a second, 1/2000th of a second, 1/3000th of a second. Those parameters are great for freezing the movement in your action. For example, someone jumping. Now, second scenario is when I'm shooting people that are moving a little bit slower. For example, you're doing a portrait, people are moving their head a little bit, or someone is walking towards you but very slowly. My settings range from 1/125th of a second to 1/250th of a second. Those settings really allow me to compensate for any small movement of the head when I'm shooting portraits, or small movement of people when they're walking very slowly. This is great. I use that most of the time when I'm shooting in the street. I'm at around 1/250th of a second, and if I'm shooting indoor portrait and I want to keep my shutter speed low yet still freeze the action, I'm going to be around 1/25th of a second for anyone not moving too fast. Now, when we're talking about still objects, then the sky is the limit, or the ground is the limit, because you're gonna go really low. So you wanna be shooting around maybe 1/50th of a second in normal circumstances while still being handheld. Now, if you want to do night shots, you're gonna go way lower, and you can even go and take second-long exposures to, for example, to get the night sky, to get the stars, to get light trails, all those cool effects that you can only get with slow shutter speed. That's when it's going to shine. Now, last but not least about shutter speed is that depending on the lens you're going to be using, if you use a long telephoto lens, you want to be shooting at a higher shutter speed than when you're shooting on a really wide angle. The simple reason is that when you look through a telephoto lens, it looks like you have binoculars. So any tiny movement that you have here is going to be really increased far in the distance. If you have ever tried to look for an object with binoculars, you might have realized this is pretty difficult when you're moving or when there is wind. This is exactly why you need a fast shutter speed to compensate for the tiny movements. There is a rule of thumb for your shutter speed, which is usually 1 over the focal length of your lens. 1/200th of a second minimum for that lens, the 70-200 when you're at 200mm. If it's a 16mm, for example, it would be 1/32 seconds. But the thing to know nowadays is that because the sensors are stabilized, you can actually go slower than that. I actually shoot handheld with that one at 0.5 seconds on a wide angle because the sensor is able to compensate. So it can be compensated in the sensor, in the camera body, or directly on the lens, which means that your camera is going to try to adjust for small movements and make sure you get a sharp photo even though you have tiny vibrations or movements. So that's something to remember, but if your sensor is not stabilized or your lens, try to follow that rule. It will be very helpful. Or if you can't, maybe use a tripod. That will make a lot of difference. Now that's it for the shutter speed. That's kind of everything you need to know. Now we're gonna go in the next video and we're gonna dig into another setting that I'm sure you're gonna be loving, especially for creative shots. Let's go.